welcome to another episode of Sanity Killer Projects. Today I'm going to show you about a condition known as death wobble. I'm going to try and reproduce it here so that you guys can see what it's doing. Currently right now the bounce that you see is just the camera mount that I have, but the car, once it gets to a certain speed, will start to shake the front axle, and it will become very, very evident what's happening on the camera because it's quite violent. Well, this is it right here. This is it doing death wobble. Condition of death wobble happens when the body of the car and the weight of the engine start to settle down over the front axle. The front axle starts to bounce violently. It's a quite dangerous condition to deal with while you're driving. In a lot of cases you can accelerate back out of it. In my particular case, the car doesn't like to accelerate out of it. So usually I have to stop, get the front axle to stop shaking, and then start back off again. So in this particular case, that's what death wobble is, and we're going to fix it. Okay, so what we end up doing with these is we end up basically going through all the suspension parts that could end up failing that would cause the death wobble to happen on the vehicle. This particular vehicle, if you've been following it, we did a 4.5-inch zone lift, which gave us new springs and shocks and lower control arms, which you can see on the passenger side right over there. That is part of what's helping the situation, but the upper control arms, which you can see one of them right there, has not been replaced. The bushings felt like they were okay, so I didn't see a reason to do it at the time, but now that we've got death wobble, we definitely have to do it. A lot of people say that you need to replace your steering dampener. I've never found on these that the steering dampener really does much anything, but you do need to replace the bushings in the track bar, which runs across here, and then there's another bushing in there on the top end of the track bar. So also, if you've been following this vehicle, a couple of things I didn't do projects on was we threw some 4 to 6 inch extension brake lines, and I replaced the calipers on both sides just to make sure I didn't have any braking issues. But as of right now, I have the car jacked up by the frame, which you can see over there behind the axle, so that the axle is down at about its lowest position. Currently the tires are still touching the ground. There's nothing really the matter with that. I'm just trying to unload the suspension and keep the weight of the vehicle up in the air, and then for the ability to move the axle around to get everything lined back up, I'm going to have the jack on the bottom of the pumpkin for realignment of my upper control arms. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start pulling one of the control arms off, and then we have to drive the axle bushings out of each side. This one is no problem. This one over here always becomes a problem because it pinches these two pieces of metal together, so you've got to put something in it to support it to keep it from jamming it. We'll show you that as we get going, but first we're going to start pulling parts off. We're going to do the upper control arms and the track bar. We're just replacing the bushings in these, but we are getting all new JKS adjustable upper control arms for the other side. I went with JKS because they are actually one of the companies that is made by the same company that makes Zone. The company makes Zone off-road, BDS suspensions. They also make JKS. They make a bunch of different stuff, but it's an American-made product. It's part of the reason I'm going with it. So we'll start pulling these off, and then I'll show you the new ones going in, the bushings coming out. All right, so for the purpose of this video, I'm doing the passenger side. I'm not going to end up showing the driver's side being taken out and installed. But the lower bolt comes out with a 15 millimeter. It's one side or the other side bites on the control arm, but the little tab that is supposed to hold onto it usually doesn't, so you usually have to clamp it with something to keep it from spinning. Then the upper bolt has a tab on it too, but this one doesn't lock into anything. So this side is a 14 millimeter and this side is a 15 millimeter. So the next thing that I did is I got ready to take out the bushing on the bottom, and the wood and the piece of and the wrench in there is actually to keep this from collapsing while I'm clamping down on it. So then the next thing I did was I Swiss cheesed this rubber. I drilled a bunch of holes in it all the way around to help relieve the pressure on it when I start pushing it. Then I'm going to clamp up something to push this out. That'll get me to the housing. When I get to where I have to take the housing out, I'm going to, I've already actually dimpled it, but I've bent it over and I'm going to keep peeling it until I can get it down far enough. And then once I get it to the point where I'm through the clamp section right here in the top, I'll knock it completely out. And then once that's done, we'll start reassembling. At this point, I'm going to push out the rubber bushing. Okay, so before I move on, I want to show you what it is that I did. I just took a C-clamp and I had a piece of 2-inch tubing, 2-inch square steel, sorry, that I flared out the ends of it so that it would wrap over the seat for it, and then I just shoved the rubber out the other end. Almost all the rubber is going to end up coming out, but not all of it, so I'm going to take the drill and just run around the perimeter of the housing once everything is done. It'll clean the rest of the stuff off, and then I'm going to peel the metal bit out of the hole. Okay, so now that I have the bushing out, I'll show you what I mean by peeling. I got the inner rubber bit Swiss cheese. I drilled a bunch of holes and got as much of it as I could out. I got the centerpiece of the bushing to come out, and then I dimpled it all along the side until it peeled down that edge, and then I just worked back and forth with the hammer driving it out. Is this the preferred method to do this? No. Is this the way to do it if you're working in your garage and don't have a whole lot of tools to do something, especially not one of those $200 kits for pushing them out? Yes. It's not necessarily going to make me look like a professional mechanic by showing this, but this is the way to do it when you got hand tools, and that's what I got here. I don't have a pusher kit for those bushings, and with the method that I use with the wood block, I managed to keep the ears straight, so I must be doing something right. On to the next. Okay, so here are the JKS J-Flex upper control arms. This one is just as it came out of the box. The only difference between this one and this is the one for the passenger side, which is the side that we're working on. I've ran the shank out to the length where it'll match up, and all I did was just stick something through it so that it would line it up. I also have one on the back that shows exactly where everything's lining up so that I know where I'm at. The Jeep that we're working on has a 4.5-inch lift, yes, but everything is already corrected to be sitting on the stock upper control arms. If in the event that I need to turn the control arms to a different length, I'm going to do that after the fact, once they're already on the vehicle. Because as of right now, it's set up for stock length. I will leave it that way. If I have to make changes because I'm still getting death wobble, then we'll do that at that point. But I would suspect, based on the fact that these are that my suspension is set up to run stock length, it'll be stock length. So the regular ones, they only come a couple threads out, and there really isn't a whole lot of adjustment. I maybe spun it out another 1 or 2 turns and then everything lined up. So that's that, and then the next thing we're going to do is drive in that bushing for the top, and then I'll take this one that's got the rods through it. I'll take this and install it, so that'll come after that. Okay, so there's the bushing installed. As you see, I put my shims back in there that keep the diameter in place because I'm pounding with a hammer on the flange for this to get it in. As you can see, it's all the way flush up against the sides where it needs to be. So the next bit we'll install that upper control arm. Alright, so there's what the upper control arm looks like in. I'm going to go over a couple things about this. When you do this, install that in first. This end will not want to line up. You're going to have to use a jack and bars and whatever alignment punches you have to get something to go through this bottom setup. I would say if you're using an alignment bar, put it in this way and then push it back out the other way. Also, now that everything is on, just so it's noted, these bits of hardware are not tight. They are snug. These get torqued, and these get torqued once the weight of everything is down on them. Also, when I do this, I'm going to re-torque the lower control arms to make sure that they're good to go. So I'm going to do the other one. I think there's one spot I plan on stopping and talking about it. Otherwise, that one I'll just be doing without the camera. So I figured I'd break in and show you this because this is actually what has caused the death wobble on my car. I'm going to keep going. I'm still going to do the track bar so that it can be, so I can show you how it gets done. But you see how on the passenger side control arm the bushing is still in and fits properly. Now don't look too much at all this bending. I had to pry this all out because it was jammed in place. But notice the bushing can actually move from side to side within the hole, and it's actually the same thing on the other side. This is completely egg-shaped out. This is actually what had caused the death wobble on this car. As I mentioned, this car has been whacked a few times before I got it, but this is not a normal condition. This is actually what has caused the death wobble. Alright, so the driver's side bushing is about halfway out. I wanted to explain a few things with this before I got too far. This one has a solid bit on the housing. Because of that, you're not worried about bending the metal bits together. You don't have to do as much work to get this particular side out. What I do is, it's a little hard to see, but I dimple one side of it, which I've done over there, push the frame of it in so that it's not getting as much binding pressure on the axle carrier, the axle housing. Then once I've got a little bit of pressure off of it, I just chisel along the side and walk the bushing out. So this one comes out really easy. You don't have to drill it. You don't have to do any of the other crazy stuff because you're not worried about how it's held in place. So that's it. I'll take this one out. I'll sand the inside of the housing up a little bit just to make sure it's smooth when the new one goes in, and then I'll bang the other one into place. Alright, so now that the upper control arm is in, I'm going to go over a couple of things. So the bushing, I drove it in with a hammer. I walked it around all the way around the bushing until it got far enough in that it was up against the flare in the bushing. That gives you the right position for where this has got to go. I reused the upper hardware, which I believe I mentioned the other one, and used the hardware that JKS gave me for the lower. This bottom stuff all takes a 17. The upper stuff is 15 millimeter. The arm is set at the exact same length as the passenger side because I had an egg-shaped driver's side. There's no real difference. You still have to jack up the axle and move it around to get it into whatever position lines up with the bolt the best, that you don't pound the bolt through. If you pound the bolt through, you'll end up messing up the threads, and you don't want to do that. So now that this is on, everything is snugged. It is not tightened. Everything is going to get torqued when we're done. So the next thing we're going to move on to is the track bar. We're going to start pulling this guy off. I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll change the bushings in it. The lower track bar bolt comes off with a 15 millimeter. The backside is backed up with this tab that binds up inside of the frame where its position is when it's in place. This one has been relocated because I have a 4.5 inch lift. This is the hole that it goes into, no longer this hole. Next we'll pull off this one. It's a castle nut and it's jam fit in place. So the easiest way to get them out is to back the jam nut off and whack the top of it with the hammer on the castle nut, not on the bolt itself, and it'll pop it loose. So now that I have the track bar off, the kit is pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to peel the bushing on this end off and put the bushing that's above it. And then the other side I'm going to drive out the pin and the bushings on that side and replace it with the stuff that's up there. Once you do that, we'll reinstall. Okay, so there is the track bar rebuilt. I will say that getting the bushing out of this end was a huge pain. I had to drill it and press the center out and then fight the outer casing to get out. Well, once I got it out, all the pieces went together pretty easily. So now we'll go install it. To get the lower track bar bolt in, just like getting your upper control arm bolt in, you're going to end up having to jack up the axle to get it to line up with your hole placement. And again, like the other side, you just snug it. We're not going to do anything torqued until it's to the ground. So the next thing I'm going to do, which I won't need to show you, is I'm going to lubricate the upper track bar, and the new upper control arms have a couple of zerks on the heim joint end, which I'm going to lubricate those. And then we'll drop the car and go over specs for torques. Alright, now that everything's lubricated on the upper control arms and on the track bar, I'm going to torque these. The track bar, the upper bolt goes to 35 foot-pounds, which is kind of an unrealistic number for you to attempt to torque in the position that's in. So it's best to just run it up as tight as it'll go and hit the closest spot for the cotter pin to go into, because if you try to torque it up there at 35 pounds, you're going to end up having to back it back off to hit the cotter pin hole. So for the lower track bar bolt, it goes to 55 foot-pounds. I already have this set up for this, so I'm going to run this one up to 55. And as soon as this thing clicks off, I know we're done, which is actually really difficult to do because I have one hand on a camera. Okay, so that is it, 55 foot-pounds. The lower side of the upper control arms, the ones that go onto the axle, go to 55 foot-pounds. The upper control arm bolts go to 66 foot-pounds. And the lower control arms, which I'm going to double check, which is this bolt and the bolt further up there, which I already got a socket sitting on, go to 133 foot-pounds. I can't really go over all this and hold the wrenches to show each one getting clicked off. That would be hard to do and hold a camera. So at this point we're done. I'd love to be able to show you me driving it around with it not wobbling, but that's not really possible because that wouldn't make sense. It's literally just me driving around. If you have any questions about any of the stuff that we've done today, please drop me a message. Lots of people do on the other videos that we do. I try to answer them when I have time to do them. But I almost guarantee, because of the oblong shape of that upper control arm on the driver's side, that was the cause of my death wobble. Doing the track bar was just a bonus, so that's all done too. Almost every bushing on the suspension has been redone except for steering bushings and sway bar bushings, which my sway bar bushings are blown. So I hope you liked the video. Please like, share, and of course subscribe. We have been getting lots and lots of watch hours, and we're slowly gaining subscribers, but we need a lot more subscribers to keep doing what we're doing, so that maybe someday this actually starts making money for a hobby. Thank you again for watching. Hope you enjoyed.